Changes now, changes now, things that seem to be solid are not.
All right, hello there, thrill seekers. That was a little bit of a song called Change Is Now, originally by The Byrds, written by Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman, and it's on their album The Notorious Byrd Brothers. And those of you who don't usually watch my music videos might enjoy this one because there's a bit of a Zen-ish theme to the lyrics, which is why I chose that song. Also, just to get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, I'm going to be in Europe starting in a little bit more than a week, I believe. And I'm going to be in Finland, Germany, and England. And if you want to go to any of those events, you can go to this URL you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/events, and you can find clickable links to find out all the information you need. Okay, with that out of the way, I wanted to answer a question. I almost didn't do a video today because I wasn't feeling that inspired, but then I got this question, and as you know, since before your sun burned hot in space and before your race was born, I've awaited a question. And this question comes from a fellow who asks this. I know you are not of the same lineage as Bankei Yotako, but could you give your thoughts on his idea of the unborn and how he felt that traditional practices such as Zazen, koan study, and precepts were not needed if this unborn Buddha mind was realized? And the reason I wanted to answer this question is not particularly because I want to expound deeply on Bankei's philosophy, because I don't know honestly all that much about Bankei. He's a Rinzai Zen teacher, and I have one book of his teachings which I've looked at and I've enjoyed, and I don't remember seeing anything in there about what this guy is asking. The idea that traditional practices such as Zazen, koan study, and precepts were not needed. I didn't come across that bit, but I probably haven't finished the whole book at this point, so maybe it's in there somewhere. I don't know. I didn't really see any indications of that sort of thing. But the reason I bring it up is because this is a thing that comes up from time to time. Now, I don't look at Reddit. I don't have an account there or anything, so I don't know much about what's written about me on Reddit, except when somebody tells me something they've seen. And one of the things that I often get, every 6 months or so, seems like, I don't really know, somebody will send me an email about they saw this thing on Reddit which says that Brad Warner is wrong because Dogen says that Zazen is totally unnecessary, and all the great masters say Zazen is totally unnecessary. So when Brad says you should do Zazen, he's wrong, and he's misrepresenting the great masters. And I guess a lot of people believe this when they see it on Reddit, because they think, oh, these guys on Reddit must know what they're talking about. Most of them don't. But, people talk a good game. You can pretend to be anything you want to pretend to be on the internet, which is the source of a lot of our problems these days, but we'll leave that one aside. But do you need to do Zazen? Well, this is a weird question because I think when people hear that question, maybe they think they know what it means, but I don't think I know what it means usually when people ask this. There's a story I remember hearing from my first Zen teacher about his teacher, Kobun Chino Roshi. And apparently somebody asked Kobun one time, what is the best thing about Zazen? And Kobun's answer at that point was, you don't need to do it. Now, you have to understand the context of this, though. So you could take that quote just as it is, out of context, and go, oh, Kobun Chino said the best thing about Zazen is you don't need to do it. So Kobun Chino says you don't need to do Zazen. I think this is the type of thing that these folks on Reddit are reaching for when they start saying, oh, the great masters have all said that Zazen is not necessary. So, yeah, you don't need to do Zazen. There's no need. You can get through life just fine without ever doing a bit of Zazen. I, for one, am very glad I was introduced to the practice at a young age, and very glad that I continue to do it every single doggone day up until this time for 40 some years. So I'm very glad that I keep doing it, but you don't need to. And a lot of times the question has an implied second part, which is, do you need to do Zazen in order to become enlightened? And then to become enlightened, I mean, this is a whole thing. What do you mean become enlightened? What is that? And I think most people who talk about becoming enlightened don't have any idea what becoming enlightened is. They just have some kind of fantasy about some kind of special state of mind where everything is groovy forever, and that's what they mean when they say become enlightened. And so if somebody says, do you need to do Zazen to become enlightened, I might look at that person and say, nah, you don't really need to. And there's certainly other examples of people who seem to have awakened to their true nature, for want of a better term, without doing Zazen. Nisargadatta Maharaj is one of my favorite examples. Ramana Maharshi is one of my other favorite examples. These are people who kind of, as far as I know, they certainly didn't do Zazen as in the traditional sort of practice that comes through Buddhism, because they weren't Buddhists, and they, as far as I know, neither of them really had any background in Buddhism at all. So they were Hindus, so that's a whole different thing. There are people who are completely outside of the Hindu and Buddhist tradition who have some kind of an awakening experience. And, what is that? There's a story, I wish I knew who this story applied to, but I heard it a long time ago, and I'm pretty sure it's true, about an Englishman during the Second World War, and his city was being bombed by the Nazis, and he sees this bomb falling, and he knows there's no way he can outrun this bomb, so he just stands there like, okay, I'm going to die right now. The bomb hits the ground, and it's a dud, and it doesn't go off. And that was such a huge shock to his system that he had this mighty sort of awakening experience. And years later, he encountered some Zen Buddhists who were able to kind of put that experience in context for him, and then he became kind of a Zen Buddhist after that. But he didn't do Zazen until years and years after his awakening experience. So you don't need it, but then again, in Fukan Zazengi, let me get the quote so I can give you the quote right. In Fukan Zazengi, which is Dogen's manual of practicing Zazen. It's what I talked about in, I believe, in the previous episode of this YouTube channel. I talk about it a lot. So it's Fukan Zazengi, because when you see a G in transliterated Japanese, it's always pronounced ga and never ja, but a lot of people see it and think it's like an Italian word and think it's Fukan Zazengi and think it's a kind of pasta, but it's not. Anyway, he says, and this is the San Francisco Zen Center's preferred translation. I just found this one convenient and used it. Most other translations are similar. It says, "Need I mention the Buddha who was possessed of inborn knowledge?" So the idea is the Buddha had the enlightenment before he was even born. "The influence of his 6 years of upright sitting is still noticeable." So his 6 years of upright citizen, that's a comedy troupe in LA. Upright sitting means Zazen. So he did this for 6 years and then had this awakening experience, and we still are aware of it. Or Bodhidharma's transmission of the mind seal. The fame of his 9 years of wall sitting is celebrated to this day. So that's the 9 years that he sat facing a wall doing Zazen. We call it Zazen now. I don't know if he did then. "Since this was the case with the saints of old, how can we today dispense with negotiation of the way?" That's how they translate it. But he's basically saying all these great Buddhist masters of the past, and he could mention hundreds more, did Zazen. Why should we be so arrogant to think that we can do without it? Nisargadatta Maharaj, I wish I had the quote here for you, but I was going through his book, I Am That, the other day, and came across this quote where he talks about the value of doing meditation, and the type of meditation that he talks about to his students sounds pretty much like Zazen. I mean, he comes from a different tradition, a different Hindu tradition, so it's not Zazen, but it's basically sitting upright and letting the thoughts just kind of pass through your mind without doing too much with them. I talked about this in my previous video and how I negotiate that, so if you want to look at that, you can. Now, just because I wanted to see what was up with Bankei himself, I have got a PDF on my laptop, the one I'm using to record this video, and it has a translation of a bunch of Bankei stuff, and using the power of the machines, I looked up the word Zazen, and I found a few quotes that are kind of interesting. Because the first one might be maybe what these people are saying, or might be one of the things that people are seeing and thinking that Bankei was repudiating Zazen and saying, oh, there's a monarch butterfly there. They come through this yard sometimes. He likes the orange tree. Anyway, they might be looking at these kind of quotes and thinking that Bankei repudiates Zazen. A monk asked, "My regular practice is to read the sutras and perform Zazen. I feel these activities are meritorious and do them all the time. Should I now give them up as useless?" Interesting question. And Bankei's response is, practicing Zazen and reading the sutras is fine. Zazen is something that all monks who seek to draw the water of Shaka's stream, so that's a cute way of saying to understand what Buddhism was about, because Shaka, that's kind of I think the translator is playing with the way Japanese people pronounce the name of the Buddha. Shakyamuni is what we call a Shakasama, I think is how I heard it when I was in Japan sometimes. Those who seek to draw the water of Shaka stream must practice and not despise. Dharma is wall-gazing, and Dharma is Bodhidharma. Tokusan ridding himself of his sutras. He's a guy who famously burned his sutras. Gutei's raising of his finger. That's how Gutei, famous Zen master, expressed Zen, the Zen understanding. Rinzai's katsu, which is a shout that Master Rinzai said to do. He was said to have done. He didn't tell people to do that. Even though these vary according to the different circumstances at the time and the particular manner of the teacher involved, they all have to do with experiencing for yourself the one unborn Buddha mind, etc., etc. And he goes on, he says, "Now you may be doing Zazen and reading sutras, but abide in the Buddha mind that you have from your parents innately, just as it is, and realize the unborn. If you practice Zazen or read sutras with some deliberate aim in mind, hoping to accumulate merit or whatever, you'll only be changing the Buddha mind for merit or changing it for Zazen in sutras. That's how it is. So all you've got to do is acknowledge with profound faith and realization that without your producing a single thought or resorting to any cleverness or shrewdness, everything is individually recognized and distinguished of itself. And all because the marvelously illuminating Buddha mind is unborn and smoothly manages each and everything." So, if you took that the wrong way, even though he says pretty clearly do Zazen, you might think it means don't do Zazen. The thing is, taking these, I think a lot of times, well, I can just tell you because I just read the intro to Bankei's book, and a book about Bankei. And he is said to have forbidden his students from writing down his words or publishing them, and they did it anyway. And the reason is, I think, because he didn't want them to be taken out of context like that. And I think a lot of us are like that. I've noticed something when I do talks. The last couple of times I was in Europe, I took a camera along, a video camera, and sat it down in front of me when I was giving talks. And this was because I'm doing this YouTube channel and I wanted some content for the YouTube channel, and I thought it'd be good. I can do that, and I've put a few of these videos up. But there's something that happens when I do that I don't like, which is that it becomes suddenly less intimate. If the thing I'm saying is only going to be heard by the people in that room who are all gathered together to do Zazen, usually when I'm in Europe, my retreats last from 3 or 5 days usually. So they're doing a 3 or a 5 day retreat, and so we're all doing Zazen, so everything I say, and we're all doing it together and sleeping together and eating the same food and sharing the same toilets and showers and stuff and saunas in Finland, and we're all naked in the sauna together. It it has a different kind of meaning from what it would have taken out of that context. So I think what happens with a lot of these sayings is that they're taken out of context. But when you read some Zen master saying something that sounds to be disparaging about Zazen, or saying Zazen is useless, Zazen is good for nothing, that's a famous quote from Kodo Sawaki, you have to understand that in the context of somebody who's doing Zazen every day and all the time, and who probably said that very thing in the context of a bunch of people doing Zazen, So it's really, it has a different sort of meaning and shouldn't be taken out. Well, one of my good examples that I thought of also comes from Koben Chino, my first teacher's teacher, and I mentioned this in my response to the guy who wrote me the question, was that Tim once told me, this Tim's my first teacher, that he was present at a Zazen Kai, a Zazen meeting, where Koben showed up late. So everybody was already in the room and the bell had rung, and they were used to Koben kind of strolling in, a few minutes late fairly frequently. And Koben walked into the room, and he looked around the room, and he looked at all these people doing Zazen and said, "What a stupid thing to do." And then he folded his arms up folded his legs up and folded his arms up too, because you got to do this, and did Zazen with them. So it means something very different from, just Joe Blow on the street saying Zazen is a stupid thing to do. Sorry, I gave him a southern accent. He doesn't have to be southern. He could be from New York City. I can't do a New York City accent very well. Anyway, doesn't matter. Could be British. Whatever. It's a whole different thing. So you have to understand this stuff in context. So is Zazen necessary? That's going to be my... I don't think I can use that title because I think I've used that title. Anyway, I'll use a title something like that. So you've already seen the title, but I haven't made it up yet. Anyway, to answer that question is, no, you don't have to do it, but everybody who realized the way has pretty much done it. I mean, there are rare exceptions, but it's just kind of the... Ziggy, hang on. It's just kind of the irony of life. Dogen sums this up in, I think this is in Fukan Zazengi. He talks about a master who's fanning himself with a fan. And the student says, well, since air is all around, why do you need to fan yourself? And the master keeps fanning himself and says, you don't understand the nature of air if you think that way, something like that. So yeah, air is all around, but you still need to fan yourself if you want to get cool. So that's kind of a good metaphor for this, and it's really nice because a breeze just came along right when I said that. So maybe God is vouching for what I just said. Who knows? Anyway, there you go, and I hope you do Zazen, but you don't have to. Another thing you don't have to do is send me a donation. You don't have to do that either. But if you want to, there are links below if you're looking in YouTube in the description of the video, or if you don't like that, you can go to the URL hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate, and there you will find my PayPal and Patreon links, and that's how I make my money. So I appreciate your support, but as always, you don't got to support me. I just said that. So we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy. Were you freaked out? He's freaked out a little bit today because we had a guy come over and kind of fix our tub, and he had to hang out while that... What do you see, Ziggy? You see something? Oh, what is that? Is that a cat? Want to go get the cat? All right, let's go get the cat.